Welcome in to the blockchain basement. We are powered by Arculus, and today we are joined by one of the greatest voices for freedom and knowledge in America, a New York Times best-selling author, a New York Post columnist, and a senior correspondent with Fox News, Charles Gasparino, who just released an amazing book called The Go Woke, Go Broke, the inside story of the radicalization and the collapse of America. Joined by him here today, Charles. An absolute pleasure to have you joining us on the channel today, sir. A lot of what you've talked about in your book is things that we hold very dear to our hearts here in the blockchain basement. We're always talking about the ESG initiatives and how they have been utilized and essentially weaponized against many states within the United States that are interested in energy production. And we've been following the process of Blackrock all the way through. Obviously, we cover the ETF side and how bullish the price action is for Blackrock covering those ETFs and buying all the ETFs. But something that was very key in the crypto world was when this ESG initiative was fought back against by 16 attorney generals from across the United States that basically highlighted how Larry Fink and Blackrock were weaponizing their own dollar to kill their own industries. Now, I really, I got a good overscope of your book, but really, if you can, give us the rundown on exactly what this book is about and what we can accomplish out of spreading this message.
I'll get into that in a minute, but you bring up a fascinating point about BlackRock and Larry Fink. Everybody knows that Larry Fink paved the way for the Bitcoin ETF, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he used his political might with the Biden administration to get a very skeptical Securities and Exchange Commission Chairman Gary Gensler to approve the Bitcoin ETF. I believe Ethereum is on the way. Mm-hmm. And BlackRock is a huge seller of ETFs. And I go through the book how that sort of manifested itself to make it such a huge player in American finance, maybe the most important and most powerful player in American finance.
Absolutely.
We can get into it in a moment. But the irony is that the guy that championed ESG, which if taken to its extremes, which a lot of people wanted to go, ESG will put crypto out of business. I mean, it will tax the energy grid of Bitcoin mining and all the necessary power that's needed for the blockchain to a point that it'll be rationed. And trust me, crypto will be rationed out of business if that does happen. So that's the sort of irony of Larry Fink becoming a born-again crypto guy.
Right.
That, literally destroyed crypto and destroyed Bitcoin mining and the sort of technology. I mean, more than just Bitcoin mining, the technology of crypto is where the skeptic in me always said, what is this stuff? You know, what does it mean? The libertarian in me says, well, wait a second. We are debasing the dollar. This could be a safer way to transact business. Plus, there is kind of a funky technology attached to it that could be revolutionary. So we need to keep both of them around to figure out where we're going with this. That's how I've always approached it. Do what you want to do. I'm a libertarian. The blockchain technology needs to be explored. You can't do that in a rationing, in an environment where you're literally rationing energy. And ESG is all about rationing energy. So that's the fascinating thing about Larry Fink getting into it. Now, we should point out that Larry Fink and BlackRock, and this is the last third of the book, is all about the reversal, how there was a consumer backlash. From people like you guys, crypto enthusiasts, from the average consumer that doesn't want to pay higher gas prices, to the notion of money managers, Wall Street, forcing rationing of energy. And that's the last quarter of the book. And BlackRock got caught in the middle of that. Larry Fink became sort of a devil to all those attorney generals you just mentioned. And has backed off his ESG. I think, listen, I like Larry Fink, just so you know, I've sat down with him. He's quoted in the book tremendously. It is interesting that BlackRock has lost a lot of assets under management when they started breaking from wokeness, including embracing crypto. Is when their assets under management came back. I don't know how Kamala Harris, who has professed love of wokeness, is going to run on it. And because she said we need to be more woke.
I'm
more broke.
More broke, yes.
I've already pulled over. I don't know how to pull over any further. I'm already awake. I don't understand quite what she's getting at when you say we need to get woker, right? I think we've gone as extreme woke as we could.
She might not know what she means. So just
what do you mean, Charles?
I mean that she's not that smart, and I think that's the scary part.
I want to get your input, Charles. Microsoft just nuked their diversity department. Is this like a bellwether for more change, or was this just, hey, Satya had to make some cuts for a quarter and they were gone.
No, I don't think he needed to make cuts. I mean, the book talks about at the end when woke is broken. We talk about how all these companies are reversing out of wokeness. One reason why they are is because the affirmative action rule that struck down affirmative action in college admissions, the Supreme Court's rule on that cited one of the Civil Rights Act. There's Title VI and Title VII. They're both essentially the same, by the way. The one that struck down was public accommodations. You can't discriminate based on race, especially schools that receive public assistance or public accommodations. The other one involves employment, but it's literally the same basis. DEI, in the way it was being practiced, is where it was hard and fast quotas. There was a time, and Bloomberg, I found this remarkable article in Bloomberg. They said that 90% of the hiring of S&P 500 companies were not white guys. I mean, they couldn't get a job. It was really some remarkable. So that's where DEI went. Then you had the Supreme Court ruling, and believe it or not, I know Jay Clayton is not a big fan of a lot of crypto enthusiasts, but he, when he was right now, he's like a consultant for a lot of companies, including American Express, on how to reverse its DEI policies to comport with the Supreme Court ruling. So that's one of the sort of triggers that ended wokeness. It's also just become a hot button political thing. It's obviously channeling progressivism and what the far left of this country represents, which is not what most Americans represent. Most Americans are, and we're talking about across class lines and race, they're just not woke. What's so odd about this branding of J.D. Vance as weird by the Democratic Party is that what he stands for is kind of what 60-70% of Americans stand for,
Absolutely.
Wife, kids, go to the movies, not be proselytized, you like to have more kids if you can afford them. I mean,
Exactly.
it's just what most people think. I mean, it is what it is. That's America. Wokeness says that is weird, and there is a backlash to it. And
that's a great point. I'd love for you to actually define wokeness, like tell people what it is for Charles.
I did ask Ellie to find me the definition of wokeness that I put in a column. So now can I just do this real quick?
Sure. Sorry, I didn't mean to throw you a curveball.
Yeah, we're good.
You can. I get thrown curveballs, all the time, people screaming at me all the time.
I think that's a great question, though, because
it is because there is a definition. And my editor told me, he said he thought this was the best definition he's ever seen of wokeness. And this is how I describe it in the book. As the pillars of American business establishment went woke, a term that so perfectly describes the progressive groupthink that seeks to fundamentally transform the country and its culture into a radical left-wing hellhole.
Wow.
Okay, we got it.
Kind of it.
Yeah.
I don't think much more than that.
Would you?
And by the way, I came up with that all on my own. Just so
Ellie, absolutely.
Ellie didn't coach me through that.
I love it.
Would you say that there's an element of cultural Marxism that under this kind of like at the bottom? Absolutely. Okay.
It's all the same. I mean, the cultural Marxism is what I just read you.
Okay.
And, Jordan Peterson probably has another definition of it. Let me see what did Jordan Peterson, it's in my book too, called it asymmetrical application of outrage is another
That is
thing.
A very Jordan Peterson definition.
Now, what does that mean? That means that you can protest and burn down cities. That's okay. But if you go outside without a mask, you're a bad guy and you're getting arrested.
Yeah.
And we saw a lot of that, particularly in 2020. I mean, that's where I think, if you go through the book, the apotheosis of woke was when George Floyd tragically was killed.
Yes.
And then you just saw these CEOs. And, one thing I will say about this book, guys, as you get into it, it's a funny read. Okay, it's serious stuff. Don't get me wrong. Watching, CEOs step on their pishad, over wokeness is the funniest thing in the world because they're so stupid and they're so ham-handed and they're so totalitarian. They're reading off of scripts and they look like idiots. I mean, Jamie Dimon, this is one scene in the book right after George Floyd. Brian Moynihan, the CEO of Bank of America, calls all his direct reports in a room and says, listen, I want everybody first to read some books by a guy named Raj Chetty. He's a progressive professor at Harvard who thinks income redistribution is the way to go. And then he says, we're going to start a $1.5 billion fund to help racially oppressed peoples. Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan hears that. He's like, wow, he's doing that? I better do $36 billion. And it just shows you how ridiculous this whole thing is.
Yeah, they're trying to one-up each other. And we also saw after the Floyd riots really kicked into gear, Even political leaders were going out on the street and kneeling to people that were burning down upwards of $60 billion worth of American infrastructure, killing police officers. And we had political leaders kneeling and bending at the knee to this movement.
So I raised this question with the people at JP Morgan, the same with Bank of America. I said, let me just see if I understand you. If you spend $1 billion, like money has never been spent for poor communities in the past, low interest loans, blah, blah, blah. So you think if George Floyd got that low interest loan, he wouldn't have been high on fentanyl. He wouldn't have walked into that convenience store trying to pass a $20 bill, and he wouldn't have resisted arrest, and the cop wouldn't have killed him if you spend billions of dollars on this sort of stuff. And, they come up with no real answer, because that's wokeness. This is all virtue signaling. It's masturbatory. There's a great scene in the book where Jamie Dimon takes a knee right around the same time, visits a branch in Mount Kisco, New York, that's in Westchester County, near where I grew up. And he takes a knee, and we all asked him, is he taking a knee in solidarity of BLM and the social justice movement? Well, believe what you want. Yeah. They kind of like confirmed it, right? So we all wrote that he's taking a knee for social justice. So when I'm fact checking the book, and you see this at the end, this just shows you how much woke is broken. I run this by the PR guy from JP Morgan, and he's like, oh, I just want to correct you on that. Jamie wasn't taking a knee for Black Lives Matter. He was simply trying to fit in the photo so he wouldn't obstruct the view from the people behind him.
Wow. And
I was like, dude, and he goes, he doesn't support Black Lives Matter. I said, all of a sudden, why didn't you say it 4 years ago? It took 4 years and probably complaints from people who bank with JP Morgan in Texas and Florida for him to come up with that. He wanted it both ways. And it's really disgusting if you think about it. Because, Milton Friedman, and I think one of the reasons why the world went woke is because of Jamie Dimon. When he ran something known as the Business Roundtable, and that's a big lobby group for every Fortune 500 company. It's like the top 100 companies. They set the agenda for corporate America. And in I think it was 2018 or 2019, check the book. They got rid of shareholder capitalism as their governing ethos of how CEOs should act, and embrace stakeholder capitalism.
Yeah.
Which opened the door to wokeness, DEI, the whole thing. And it's really pathetic. And one thing I did, Larry Fink has had a come to Jesus moment, as you will see in the book. And it's funny how it happened. He was targeted by this guy. He's like a 30-year-old kid, so you guys can relate to him. His name is Will Hild. He runs an activist organization. And all he did for 2 years was troll Larry Fink around Manhattan. Billboard signs of vulnerability, drove him nuts. It actually got the red state treasurers and politicians and governors like DeSantis involved in anti-Blackrock activism to stop DEI, and it forced change. It was really remarkable. And we're at the point now where Larry Fink won't use the word ESG anymore because of Will Hild. And I think that's kind of where we're coming out of this now. Is woke totally broken? Of course.
That was my next question. What's the forecast, weatherman?
I kind of wanted to stay around a while so I could sell more books. So let's not.
Okay.
Just self-servingly. But, it's just the forces of change never. No one does 180s. There's no such thing as a 180. There's a significant cultural corporatist movement out there. These corporations still turn to the Human Rights Campaign to guide them on their DEI rankings.
They're the moral arbiters.
Yeah, they are still. They're still powerful. They still, less so because we expose them, not just me, people like Chris Rufo at the Manhattan Institute, and I cite his work.
Great work.
So I think it's incumbent upon journalists that are heterodox, like I am, to start to keep the focus on this, because it really is bad it's bad for corporate America, but it's bad for the country. You shouldn't go to work and be deemed a white male oppressor. And that's what was going on for a while, particularly after George Floyd. There were indoctrination sessions at these companies and I go through them. It's stupid. It's counterproductive. You need people to work together. You shouldn't have points taken away from you because you're a white guy or a white woman. A rich South American should not be given points over a coal miner's daughter. That's what happens under DEI. Intersectionality is where all this thing comes up, whether, if you're a black lesbian woman, you're at
the top of the food chain
over a white gay man. That's how intersectionality works, and that's how DEI works. And that is so. Listen, if you want to teach that stuff at the college level and people want to take those electives, go for it. That's un-American. It's it's probably illegal. I mean, based on readings of the civil rights laws.
That's how it feels. It's very anti-American, and
Yeah.
it's against the opportunity for everybody here in America, that whole conversation. And you hit some really main points with what I saw with Target. You know, I have 4 small kids, and they love the environment of Target. But once I saw the local Target begin to be captured by these woke initiatives, they no longer get my dollar. I also move out of a state. Once I lived in Boulder, Colorado, and I absolutely fled to nearly the border of Alabama, into the woods, because I see what the world is coming to. Yeah. And, you know, it's voting with your dollar.
In New York, okay. Well, I got into Target pretty heavily in this book.
Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah, I
don't
saw
know if
that.
you went through that chapter. So one of the things, I mean, there were 2 things I tried to figure out, try to put to Target as we were engaging with them. You know, how do you come up with, mannequins for? I mean, who sits in the meeting in like the marketing meeting and says, okay, this year's Pride displays, which we're going to do for a full month, and it's going to be bigger and better than ever. We do need tuck-friendly bathing suit mannequins. I mean, like who, where are you coming with that? And then also, I ran that by them. And the second thing I ran by them, I said, listen, I don't have kids. I'm pretty libertarian. It doesn't bother me to see that stuff. But did any of you folks put yourself in the shoes or high heels of a woman with 2 kids shopping at Target in strollers because she's working class and she can't afford daycare? That has to be that sits there and sees rows and rows of Pride stuff, including tuck-friendly bathing suits for men transitioning to be women, next to rainbow color onesies, and books that talk about trans young adults. I mean, it's like, why go there? I mean, who can? This is not, first off, it's not your target audience.
Yeah.
I couldn't get any real answers from inside the company. They kind of talked around it. But
it's a hard question for them to answer, and they know they're losing middle America because of that.
It's DEI. It's DEI forces you to do stuff that's essentially against your best interests if you're a business, because you do alienate so many people. And this whole thing with Target was, the consumer backlash I found was building for years. It was interesting. It reached this sort of high point in 2023 where they went over the top, and I think that's still an overhang of the wokeness of 2020. In 2023, you did have these sort of flashpoints, and then you had the rebellion. And one flashpoint was Disney trying to oppose a law that said you can't teach sex to kids, which is stupid because the law is pushed by a governor that's popularly elected, DeSantis. Legislature. I mean, people were for that law. It was the Budweiser Dylan Mulvaney ad where you had a trans woman giggling in a bubble bath as you're trying to sell beer. I mean,
that's where I knew the Matrix was broken. That's where I knew, like, okay, all bets are off. Reality is gone. But with that pendulum ball going so far to the left, now, in my opinion, it's coming hard back to the right. And will probably be that way
in sectors,
for some time.
though, in spurts and phases, because I'm I'm a screenwriter by trade. I'm in the Writers Guild, and I'm in all the meetings with the people trying to find work and the producers. They know that they're. I mean, you wrote about it about Disney. It's not just Disney. Like, everyone's getting just absolutely wrecked because they've forgotten how to tell stories, but they can't get out of their own way. Part of why I went over to YouTube is because I'm an unhireable, right? I'm an unmentionable, but they still can't.
Why are you unhireable?
Because I'm a straight white male conservative.
That's a tough sell.
And as soon as they looked at my Twitter profile, they were like, no. And like the Warner Brothers, I was actually on a call with Warner Brothers, and they said 50% of our writing staff has to be DEI by the end of the year. And I'm like, that's a racial quota. Like, how is this not a problem? And I got basically shouted off the call.
When did they say that, by the way?
That 2022, and it hasn't changed since then. So I can go and I have stories, dude.
Listen, I know this because, I got a DEI cheat sheet out of Disney. It's in the book.
Yeah.
Where they talk about this sort of essentially quotas all the way down from greeters, interns, and, from the top to the bottom, and then characters in the movies and all that. I do have a feeling some of that is changing. I mean, here's one problem that they have with this is that all these companies are coming under tremendous financial pressure.
Yes.
Because they do have to sell stuff. And
Mhm.
If you're going to launch into streaming, which is costly, people aren't going to the movies, which costs. Well, there you go. Woke is broken.
Well,
You see that?
do you want to fix it real quick?
Yeah,
We're still
we
recording.
can fix it. We can take our time.
Let it go. I think
Okay.
that's a good prop.
I mean, that's what
was
happened.
Bob Iger. That was the ghost of Bob Iger.
Yeah. No, it's very representative. And, I mean, what Nick is talking about, it's a very scary reality. I used to be a headhunter for development companies, engineers, structural engineers. And I myself, on the HR end, realized that they no longer were interested in credentials. They were no longer interested in the education or the track record of completed projects from structural engineers. Rather, they were interested in the ethnic background of those engineers first and foremost. And that was before flu season. It represented a very dangerous precedent for me as someone who wants American infrastructure to be overhauled in a positive manner. Now I have to worry if the bridge is being built
DEI
correctly.
bridge. Are we?
Yeah. I mean, that's a serious problem.
Listen, I mean, I think Elon Musk was highlighting this about, all the mishaps at one of the major airlines that pushed DEI. I think it was Boeing. They like DEI for their pilots, DEI for this, for that. Their stuff is malfunctioning. Would you want a DEI doctor to perform a surgery on you?
I would be terrified. I would be absolutely terrified.
There is some of that, by the way, but medical field is a little different in that you have to pass boards and stuff like that. So, it does get weeded out, but it is scary what's going on with this. And I do think the pendulum is coming back where they have to back off this just because they're going to get sued like crazy. There's going to be a lawsuit. And the book talks about, I actually interview lawyers that are ready to rock and roll with this stuff. These companies are settling out of court with people just to let it go. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that because they don't want a precedent-setting motion here.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's going to happen. And it's scary that we got here, and it's so counterproductive and it's so illegal. And here's the thing, and it's like turning traditional liberals against the progressive movement. I've noticed that when you tell them, I mean, that's what this book is written about. You're a mom, generally vote Democrat. You have two boys. And by the way, they can't get a job. They can't get into a school because they're white, male. That's got to be a killer. But that's happening.
It is. And my wife was previously pretty liberal. And over the past few years, she is considering voting for Donald Trump at this rate. She's terrified of Kamala Harris. She's terrified of the loss of negotiating skills that Kamala Harris would bring to the table in light of the macroeconomic situation that the U.S. is facing with BRICS, whether anyone wants to acknowledge it or not. She is actually, she really hopes for RFK, for a third party to pop up. It's going to take some time for a third party to really have some movement. And the aggravation within people that are on the edge, they're thinking either right or left, they're open to ideas. They see the Democratic Party arbitraging RFK off of ballots as much as they possibly can. Meanwhile, Trump campaign rolling out ideas for different positions that RFK could have within a Trump presidency. So it really is one side of the table is having this bipartisan good conversation. Meanwhile, I am kind of terrified about the left's next move because I really don't think Kamala is the one that they're going to want representing at the polls in November.
I mean, RFK Jr. might end up endorsing Trump and possibly getting a role in the Trump administration. I heard Tucker Carlson mentioned that on this podcast. I just want to point out we're all for I'm for diversity. I don't know about you guys. I mean,
100%.
I mean, I'm an Italian American. I'm not some WASP. Trust me. Italian Americans were considered a minority not too long ago. And they still are to a certain extent. Working class. My father worked 2 jobs. I went to state schools. I'm for diversity of thought. DEI takes it to another level. We should point out that Kamala Harris is the last person that should benefit from DEI. She grew up wealthy. The daughter of 2 college professors, and one's a PhD, the other one is a biologist. I mean, this is not, and she grew up mainly in Canada in a very affluent area. This is not someone, we're not talking about a poor black person from the hood. And she's the typical beneficiary of DEI, by the way.
Yeah.
And that should change. I mean, that has to change.
It is. She's the opposite of Ben Carson.
Yes. Ben Carson grew up poor. worked his way through, got in on a minority scholarship, and made some of himself. Became a great doctor. And no one's against that. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about literally bean counting and discrimination at some rank high level. Corporations went there. They need to be exposed. I'm going to keep exposing them. The best part about it is literally what I tried to do is put the mic in their face. Tell me why you did this. And that's where they sound stupid. And that's where, this is absurd, and it's criminal and suspect and corrupt.
It is. And it's I think Thomas Sowell said it's the soft racism of low expectations.
Absolutely.
It just permeates DEI at every level. Charles, tell our audience where they can find your book. Give us your pump up.
Amazon. You can go to Hachette's website. It can direct you to numerous things. It's called Go Woke, Go Broke, The Radicalization of Corporate America. Type in my name, Amazon. It comes up, and order yours. Thank you.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Before we go, do you own any Bitcoin? Are you a Bitcoiner?
I do not.
Okay.
I try not to own stuff that I cover.
That you talk about. I understand.
That's fair.
I just never want to get into that. That's why I'm like the most prosaic investor. I got bonds, occasional S&P 500 fund. I got some cash. That's not a bad place. 5% in cash ain't bad. But I'm deathly afraid of being like saying, oh, you just, having the SEC knock on your door. You just wrote about Apple. You own I don't want that.
Yeah, I understand. I understand completely. Well, if you're ever crypto curious, you can feel free to stop by anytime, and we will. Yeah, absolutely. Cool.
Charles, thank you so much for this insightful, in-depth look at what is literally threatening the foundation of this country. And we're going to be fighting this good fight with you and spreading this information as far and as wide as we can get it. Appreciate your time very much, sir.
Thank you so much, guys. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely.